Hello. Hi. Baweep, grana weep, ninibong. No, that wasn't gibberish. It's a really obscure nerd reference. Welcome to my first video. As you can see, I'm no longer in front of a green screen. It was a pain in the butt to get working, so instead you get to stare at my wonderful closet door. No, I'm not going to show you what's behind it, but I think this is going to be the format going forward for videos that I want to pursue. It's just gonna be an unhinged mess. My whole idea of making things a whole lot nicer and neater with a green screen just it became too much work. So instead we're doing this, and it caused me to do more improv. Um, Also, I have a script down here that I'm gonna follow, and hopefully I do it right since I don't have a prompter. Uh, but yeah, welcome. So first video, as you can probably tell by the title, I'm sure it's something stupid. Um, this is discussing age ratings because this is something that's been on my mind. It was kind of a script I started writing as I wanted to get this channel going. Um, yeah, it's just an interesting subject, right? Okay, so let's get into it. Like when we think of age ratings, we usually think of the term the following presentation has been rated by the Motion Picture Association of America, right? And we see that before a bunch of movies. I mean, you've seen it your entire life if you've watched any movies at all, whether it's been in the theaters or heck, sometimes on streaming services. Actually, no, I take that. Stream services don't have it quite the same way. But for the most part, every movie has this before it. And if you were a young kid, anything rated above PG, when you'd see that, was, kind of like cool and shocking. At least for me, right? Like, I remember I'd sit down and go see a movie, and if it had like PG-13 in front of it, I'd be like, whoa, cool, heck yeah, what am I watching? But nowadays, I often hear people refer to a rating as like a way of selling how edgy or grounded a film can be. They're like, oh yeah, no, this film's so good because it's rated this. Which is kind of confusing because that's not actually what the age rating has any effect on. So I kind of wanted to discuss about like what each age rating means, how they came to be, sort of, whole myriad of things, as well as like talk about kind of modern audience perception of things and how stuff has shifted over the years. This will be relevant. This is all actually going to lead into an upcoming video discussing Andor. So this will be interesting. So first of all, like when it comes to movies, there are 5 possible ratings that a movie can have before it's released to the general public. You have G, PG, PG-13, R, and NC-17. So first of all, G, it's for general audiences, kind of self-explanatory. Basically, everyone can watch this, whether it's your 90-year-old senile grandmother, your 3-year-old kid that you're babysitting, or the annoying neighbor next door. Next one is PG, parental guidance. It's kind of self-explanatory. It just kind of means like, oh, there might be some stuff in here that some people could be sensitive to. I mean, it's still really relatively tame. There might be like 1 or 2 suggestive things that come in there. You have PG-13, which stands for parental guidance. I can't speak. Getting all tongue-tied. PG-13, which stands for parents strongly cautioned, especially for children under 13. That means there could be like some more mature subject matter in there, a few more swear words, a little bit edgier, more violence, right? R for restricted, which basically means that if you're under 17, you can't go in without an adult. And then if you're over 17, you can go see it. And once again, that usually deals with the subject matter. And then NC-17, which is for no children under 17 admitted, which is, I can safely say, not one I've ever seen. Isn't one that's given out too commonly. We'll discuss that in a little bit. And then, each kind of one is distinct from each other. They all kind of mean something different, right? Like like I said earlier, if you sit down and go watch a movie with your 3-year-old nieces, nephews, or the kids that you're babysitting, you generally want to throw up something that's G, sometimes PG. For the most part, these are like animated movies, but there are plenty of movies, well, especially G, there's a lot of movies that are animated that are G. PG can cover a whole wide range of things. PG-13, you start getting more violence, more intensity. It's usually for the cooler kids. At least for me growing up, I never watched like a PG-13 movie until I was 13, which I think was like Spider-Man 1 or 2. Not even Star Wars Revenge of the Sith did I see until I was like 13, which is kind of wild. I can understand why, but yeah, that's just how it was. And then you have R, which is obviously like things that you pretty much just want to take adults to. Um, I mean, it's up to your own discretion, but I generally don't recommend R-rated movies for children. And of course, NC-17 movies I just don't recommend at all, but that's out of my personal taste. Um, and then one of the important things when it comes to rating a movie is it's like people don't understand there is a serious and rigorous process that comes into rating a movie by this MPAA, the Motion Picture Association of America. I don't know the details. A lot of people don't know the details in general. It's kind of this gray, mushy area where sometimes it's like, hey, why did this movie get this rating and why did that movie get that rating? But it's a very meticulous process. Like sometimes it can even be a scene has to be cut back by like 3 seconds, and that makes a difference when it comes to rating. Or it's even things where it's like, hey, you have to cut out this entire subplot or it changes the reading of it. But there's some serious thought, and the people who do this are kind of crazy and wild, but there are some general themes into, what will get a movie a certain rating. Um, and then TV ratings are very similar. I'll kind of get into those later, but we will touch on that briefly as well, because this is more directly ties into things, especially later on, that I'll discuss in other videos about TV ratings and why they are the way they are. So kind of like the history, some cool little bonus points about history of TV ratings. So the MPAA was founded in like the 50s or 60s. I don't know the full details. And it went through some name changes, whatever. But anyways, the first iteration of movie ratings rolled out in 1968. And what's interesting is the ratings were a little bit different because they were G, M, R, and X, which are quite a bit different from what we see nowadays. Though sometime shortly after, I didn't look up the full time, but it's like in the next couple of years, M quickly became PG. I think just PG sounds better than M, since M generally stands for mature. Then in 1984, PG-13 was introduced, and the first film that got a PG-13 rating is a movie called The Flamingo Kid, which I've never actually seen, and for the longest time I thought it was a different movie. But what's interesting is Steven Spielberg, the famous guy that did like BFG and Schindler's List and Jurassic Park. I don't know why I put BFG up there. I didn't actually like that movie. But Spielberg, the guy who's great at movies, did Jaws and all of that kind of stuff, right? So he was really, really into creating this new rating and partially responsible for it. In particular, there are kind of like 3 movies that were credited specifically for inspiring the PG-13 rating. You've got Temple of Doom, Poltergeist, and Gremlins. These were all originally PG, which is kind of wild to think about nowadays. I mean, Temple of Doom kind of has some sexual stuff in it, as well as blood and violence with the whole heart-ripping scene. And that's part of the reason why PG-13 was created. All 3 of those movies that I just listed were eventually changed to PG-13 after their release and after the creation of this rating. Mainly because parents complained. They were like, hey, I don't want to just go take my 7-year-old kid to Temple of Doom or Poltergeist. Gremlins is, I would say, a little bit of a questionable area. I might talk about that later in a future video. I love the movie Gremlins. It's a great Christmas movie. But yeah, parents kind of complained because, they had a lot of sexual themes in them, a good bit of violence, blood, and swearing. So kind of stuff that, you might want to shelter a younger child from. But yeah, so that's all about PG-13. And then in 1990, X became NC-17, as well as the MPAA just started adding descriptors to ratings. So it used to be when you go see a movie, it would just say this movie is rated PG-13, but then it wouldn't really say why. Nowadays they do. They usually have descriptors in there, which I'll get more into later, which is kind of cool that it wasn't until the 90s they added that. The other thing that I found kind of fun that was this is all from like an official timeline that the MPAA has posted on their website. I'll probably link that down below if I don't show the graphic here. But they made note of, in 2007, smoking was added to the ratings descriptor list, which is kind of funny because I have quite a few movies that were released before then and they're older DVDs, and they don't have the smoking thing, and then all of a sudden you find after 2007 things have listed as smoking, which is kind of funny that when you sit down to watch a movie and it's like language, gore, smoking, just kind of a funny thing, but I get kind of why they did it. But yes, that's a brief history of ratings and kind of the MPAA's involvement in it. Now let's get into descriptors. Okay, descriptors are fun. There's some words that you can generally find that are associated with movies when it comes to describing things. In particular, there's adjectives like intensity adjectives. You've got brief, which is a type of content that only occurs in like one scene. You have mild, you have something that any type of content that isn't severe or harsh. So really just kind of something more tame, not too worrisome, but still, present. You have some, which is, like this type of content will appear in multiple scenes, usually just at least 2 or 3 scenes. It can also be referred to as sequences of. So it's not something that's super prevalent, but it's still a little bit more there than brief. So you might have a couple things that you need to skip if you're censoring something for younger children. You have strong, which is something that is, kind of self-explanatory. Strong, it's more prevalent. It can also be used like it's a synonym with graphic, intense, brutal, vicious. They all kind of coincide and line up together. Then you have pervasive, which is kind of self-explanatory. It's type of sustained, prevalent content, something that's there throughout. And like I just mentioned, sustained is one of the other words that goes with it. So it's very, very heavily there. There's a garbage truck outside, so you might be hearing that in the audio. Hopefully not, but there could be a garbage truck there. Now when it comes about content, right? So we talked about the intensity descriptors. One of the common things that we see as far as content descriptors go, you have like substance use, whether that's alcohol and drugs, you have violence, you have language, you have nudity, you have sexual themes, you have blood and gore. So all these things will show up as a listing, like usually it'll be like, hey, mild nudity, or strong gore, or strong's not as much, but pervasive gore, things like that, right? Or even substance abuse and even smoking. Smoking is really kind of the one that doesn't have an intensity descriptor in front of it. That one's usually on its own. The rest will generally have some sort of intensity descriptor before them to give you an idea of how much they might be there. All right, well, as the keen-eyed among you may have noticed, it is in fact a different day that I am filming this part from the first part of this video. 2 reasons. Partially because I didn't quite like what I said, but also I realized I had more thoughts that I wanted to add onto it. I just coincidentally happened to wear the same exact shirt because it's one of my favorites. So anyways, let's get into it. Also, I apologize if there's weird stuff going on with my bookshelf over here, like weird light fragmenting and things like that. I don't know what's going on and I'm trying to work on it, but hopefully we get better at that. So, what does it all mean? All of this mumbo jumbo and talking about what different ratings signify. Well, partially it goes to show that movies have been rated very differently over the years. As you can tell by the fact that things were changed as far as what descriptors were added, or even things were changed as far as severity. Some of the examples I like to include is my favorite movie of all time, Last of the Mohicans, is rated R, when really the violence in it is on the same level as most modern PG-13 movies. In fact, there's very little blood in it. Same with Air Force One, actually. I still don't fully know why that one is rated R. I need to look more into it, but the first time I discovered that, it kind of confused me. Because once again, it's not that severe of a movie. Another great example of things having been changed, or ratings kind of being wonky, Jaws. Famously PG because it came out before PG-13. It actually originally had an R rating, and that was because of a few seconds that were added in of the guy in the rowboat in the estuary. Apparently there was a shot where the shot where his leg was falling down through the water was actually longer. And Steven Spielberg had to cut a few seconds of that, shorten it to what we see in the movie now, to avoid it getting that R rating. Another famous example of a great PG movie having stuff in it that really shouldn't. Airplane has nudity in it. That would not fly nowadays. In the good news, though, things have kind of stabilized a bit as far as what you can include in a movie and what things are generally acceptable. Because obviously in the last 20 years, we haven't really had very many, as far as I'm aware, American-made PG movies that would have things like nudity. The other thing that's kind of changed a bit is the severity of swear words that you can have. I remember growing up talking about PG-13 movies that had F-bombs and kind of being like, okay, how many does this one have? How many does that one have? Does it have it at all? And we could never find a solid number on what would have that. Well, let me rephrase that. We could never find a solid number online that would say, hey, you can have this many swears and this many F-bombs before it becomes R, and vice versa. And what's interesting, actually, while I was doing this research, I discovered and watched the movie Adventures in Babysitting, which is a PG movie, and it has 2 F-bombs in it, back to back. Kind of interesting. But in general practice over the years, it's kind of been determined that, hey, you can have 2, and anything more than that, you're going to have to go up to an R rating. The other thing that's kind of changed over the years is content regarding nudity and the likes. I know a lot of PG-13 movies, especially in the 2000s and early 2010s, could get away with hinting at nudity, whether that's showing someone's rear or Angelina Jolie in Tomb Raider. They also were able to kind of show a bit more of some of the actual actions. I'm not going to go into too many details about that. But nowadays you see less and less of that, and that's for twofold. One, a point that I'm going to make a little bit later on, and then also severity of nudity has kind of just moved its way so that you show things that you're used to, and now all of a sudden it gets an R rating. And the other thing too, it's interesting that I want to talk about, is TV ratings. You should have, well, you should see, not you should have, I don't know why you would have, but when watching something, you should see either 4 TV ratings: TVY7, TVPG, TV14, or TVMA. And for the most part, those ratings are universal in what they share with movie ratings. The exception being TV14. TV14 can generally show a little bit more than PG-13 can. And also their rules aren't as well defined as the MPAA's ratings are. TV ratings are still a little bit more up to each individual network, but they're very, very similar. And for the sake of this video, I'm going to kind of lump them together. Okay, the thing that I really wanted to talk about with this age rating video is not just how age ratings have changed over the years, but also how our perception of age ratings have changed. And really kind of the big mastermind behind that perception change, even if it was completely unintentional. And that is Disney. Disney has had a massive effect on our perception as a modern audience of ratings when it comes to movies. In particular, PG-13. Because most of the MCU is PG-13. However, most of the MCU pretty much only has violence and some swearing. Not any of the rest of the stuff that PG-13 can cover, like nudity or darker subjects along those lines. I mean, look at Bond films and like Taken, for example. Those are PG-13, but they have a very, very different kind of content within them than what you would see in the MCU film. And it's kind of created this negative effect and impact on the modern audience, because I will roll into a PG-13 movie fully expecting, no matter who makes it, or heck, even a TV-14 TV show, no matter who makes it, for it to include, or have the potential to include, certain kinds of content, including things that are a bit more mature. However, I go into movie theaters all the time now, and I will see 6, 7-year-olds in a PG-13 movie. And I believe that's partially brought about because the internet has desensitized people to so much stuff, but also because Disney has made this effort to have so many PG-13 movies without certain kinds of content in it that parents just go in and expect them to be family friendly now. Which is kind of interesting because it does have some effects on modern audiences' perception of films and the quality that a film can have. Because a rating should be something more of like, hey, you walk into it and you can expect any manner of content within this means. So G, you know that you can show to a 7-year-old. PG, you know you can show to somebody who's like, you know, pre-teens getting into early teens. PG-13, they need to have a little bit better understanding of some darker concepts. Now, that doesn't mean that your rating should confine your quality of writing. It just means that you have certain things that you need to try to work in. Best example I can kind of give of this is The Incredibles, right? We all love that movie. The Incredibles from 2005, I believe. I could be wrong, I'll correct it later. Not going to touch on Incredibles 2 here. That's going to be an entirely different video. However, The Incredibles 1 has so many concepts in it that you wouldn't expect to be in a PG movie, just because our perception of them has changed, right? You have a man jumping off of a building in the beginning and mentioning explicitly what he was attempting. I'm not going to say it because YouTube. You have the implications of an affair, right? Mr. Incredible is implied to be in the eyes of Mrs. Incredible, she suspects that he's being unfaithful. Even though we know that's not true, of course. There are real bullets being shot at the children. Okay, these aren't laser guns or anything like that. They are real actual bullets. And you have the subject of death being talked about multiple times. All of these are kind of darker subjects that you wouldn't expect to see in a PG movie nowadays. However, the rating system hasn't changed since then. The quality of the writing has, and people expecting certain quality of writing is what has changed, right? Another great one that I want to talk about, this is actually a bit of an exception, is Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, right? That is a PG movie that has death in itself, there, okay? Death is chasing Puss in Boots throughout the movie, and it's a darker subject, but it's able to handle it well. Another fun one that I like discussing, especially when it comes to Star Wars, and I'll talk about this more when I eventually cover Andor, is people going, oh, Star Wars shouldn't be that dark, Star Wars is for children. Need I remind you that the prequel trilogy, created by George Lucas, literally has the protagonist massacring children and women. So no, I really don't think that something in Star Wars is going to be too dark, okay? Anything that happens in the real world could very well potentially happen in Star Wars, okay? It's just the modern audience's perception of that, because you have so many things like Mandalorian or the Disney sequel trilogy that doesn't really cover these dark subjects and doesn't think its audience is mature enough to handle those subjects. I already talked about Taken 1, that's a good one. That also kind of has more mature subjects. That's very much like, hey, this is a PG-13 movie. You shouldn't just go take a 7-year-old to it. Oh, another one I really want to talk about. Iron Man 1. Okay, look at the difference between Iron Man 1. My voice is dying. Give me a moment. And we're back. As my voice still gives me issues. Let's look at Iron Man 1 here, okay? Iron Man 1 has Tony womanizing. Okay, he's going out to parties, he's drinking, he's not being the greatest of people. And honestly, Iron Man 1 is not much of a family movie. There are going to be things that you reasonably should cut out for a 6-year-old if you were to show them that movie, right? Whereas look at modern Marvel movies. For the most part, they don't have any of that. It has all been left out. It is just fun CGI action, a few swears, some questionable jokes, and then a plot focusing on the superheroes, right? Whereas Iron Man 1 was very much a different breed of film. One of the things that I really want to talk about is how, when it comes to rating a movie and writing a movie, you really shouldn't say you can't or shouldn't when it comes to writing a movie within a certain rating, okay? You can always find a way, like we've talked about with Incredibles or with Puss in Boots. That was the other one I was trying to think of. Right? Those writers took a mature concept that could be hard for children to handle and found a way to write it well so that children could understand things, that they could learn and grow. Okay, the quality of your writing shouldn't be hindered by the rating. And in fact, this is going to be a contentious point. I think actually Avatar: The Last Airbender is a great example where the quality of the writing is hindered by the age rating. But that'll be a different story entirely. Now, yes, there are stories that do deserve higher ratings and can't be told. Well, I should say, there are stories that are greatly affected by the rating, as in they can be told in a much better form with a higher rating than if they were at a lower rating. For example, Joker, right? Joker would not have landed the same way if it had been done as a PG-13 or a PG movie. But those are very few exceptions, okay? And that was also intended for a very different audience. I can almost guarantee you that Todd Phillips was not planning on people taking their 6-year-olds to Joker, nor should people do that. The other thing that can be kind of a hindrance when it comes to perceptions of age rating is playing things safe, right? If people automatically assume that, hey, a PG movie or a PG-13 movie should play things safe, that's a subject material we shouldn't touch, right? it will lead to bad writing, and it will lead to audiences not being able to understand good writing. It has a twofold effect here. If you start saying, oh, hey, we can't trust our audience to be able to handle this subject material, so we won't include it, then at that point, you're just binding your hands in what you can write. And you start just creating more and more things that are alike and more things that are similar. If you start saying you can't or you shouldn't, you limit yourself. Okay, can't and shouldn't are the enemies of creativity. Now, there are definitely boundaries, but that is up to you to work around. And good writing will always work around it. And it's kind of also had this long-term ramification on modern storytelling. Yes, there are so many other factors when it comes to why modern movies suck, but one of them is honestly the audience's perception and the writer's perception of what a rating defines. There are so many writers out there that just go, oh, well, I can't do this because of this rating. No, you should find a way. There are certain subject materials that audiences can handle, and we've proved ourselves that way for decades. Okay, movies have been around for almost a century now. We can handle them as audiences, and you should trust your audience when you write a movie. You should trust your audience that they can understand what you're going to be saying. And it's just kind of this weird conundrum because it's also affected things in TV too, where writers don't expect their audience to be able to handle certain subjects. Okay? That is just wrong. Trust your audience to know the level of what they can see within a certain writing space and go within a certain writing space of an age rating, I should say. I know that sentence probably didn't make much sense, but you as an author should trust your audience. Okay? If you are writing within a certain rating, trust that you can do it. Okay? Now, what is the big old conclusion of this ramble? And once again, this ramble is probably going to be partially incoherent, so I hope you stick with me. But the conclusion I want to make here is that by allowing the rating to hinder your quality of writing, you're avoiding risks, you're avoiding chances, you're avoiding being able to stand out and do good. Okay, filmmaking is about taking actual risks, not perceived risks to challenge something or challenge a perception. No, you need to take actual risks and trust that your audience will be able to follow along. And even if you're not sure of the target audience to begin with, you will find an audience. You shouldn't just be writing to say, oh, hey, I need to stay within this age rating, so I'm going to do this kind of lackadaisical story because it's super, super safe. Be unafraid of your story and what you want to tell, okay? Be unafraid of your story and what you need to tell with it. Age ratings are there to let an audience know, hey, you can expect this kind of thing in this movie. Age ratings are not there to tell you as a writer, hey, you should just avoid things entirely, or, oh, hey, you shouldn't be as expressive as you need to be, okay? Age ratings are there for the audience, not for the writers. And if you as a writer cannot adapt and grow to go around what a film needs, or what the story might need, then reconsider what you're doing. Get some outside help. Look at it from another lens. Find some inspiration, okay? You should avoid subtracting from your story. Always find a way to grow and adapt. And again, I'll pull up The Incredibles here because The Incredibles, if you watch the behind the scenes featurettes, especially the deleted scene stuff, it's amazing how many things he wanted to include that movie, but went, you know what? This isn't working the way it is. Let's adapt it. Let's find a way in there instead of just saying, hey, we're not going to do anything like this entirely. Okay, adapt and grow. It is a continual process of writing. And the reality is too, life is uncomfortable. Movies should have uncomfortable things in them too. Yes, they are a form of escapism, and that is why we go to movies. But you can still have uncomfortable subjects within a movie and have it be an escape from reality. Okay? Don't be afraid of it. Don't be afraid of uncomfortability, and don't be afraid of stretching and growing. And truth be told, the audience, we need to be more conscientious when we approach a project. Okay? We can't just judge something because it's, oh, hey, it's this franchise or it's this IP. It's not going to have this kind of thing. Oh, or hey, we can't go into this saying, you know what, there's no way that this company would do that, right? No, it is rated the way it is for a particular reason. It is on us to be conscientious. And hopefully, if more people can be conscientious and we kind of shift out of the mindset that we're in, luckily I'm starting to see a bit of that out in the real world, but it's still not enough. If we can be conscientious as an audience, hopefully we can start turning things around and getting back to the glory days of movies and TV shows, really. So thank you for tuning into this wild ramble, and hopefully some of it made sense and resonated with you. And if not, let me know. I'm always down to hear from the comments, whether that be good or bad. And be sure to check out other content on this channel and tune in for more future content. I've got some great things coming up from several different IPs that I absolutely love. And I appreciate you taking the time to listen to this. So be sure to reach out to me and tell me your thoughts, and I will see you next time.